HR became the conscious. HR became the stabilizer. HR started to help managers respond.
To be truly effective in this new normal, how HR practitioner must adapt to this pandemic?
You know, COVID has taught us something that we didn't realize we knew, and that as HR practitioners, and that is that we can actually be very agile, we can be very flexible, and actually we can adapt. Most organizations work very tightly with their HR policies, and many of us will say we can't do something because the policy says we can't do it. What COVID has taught us is that actually it can be done. I'll take, for example, many organizations have what we call a flexible working policy. And I'm sure if you were to look at the uptake of people who use this flexible working policy, you'd find about maybe 2% of the total organization. And they go through a long process of getting pre-approval because managers will assume the person is not working. Work cannot be done. It cannot be productive. What COVID has taught us is that all of this is absolutely possible. As organizations, we went from 2% flexible working to 100% over a long period of time. And the question is, are we working? Are we being productive? Are we able to deliver? And the answer is yes. So this begs the question, have some of our mental models as managers been perhaps old-fashioned? If you think about how work was done a long time ago, you clocked in at 8 in the morning, you clocked out at 5 p.m. These were manufacturing hours. Today we have the knowledge worker. Somebody gets a brilliant idea at 3 o'clock in the morning. Is that brilliant idea work or is it not work? So what this pandemic has taught us is that really we have to reimagine what work is. We have to reimagine what the workplace is, and we have to reimagine what the workforce is. And when we start to reimagine these things, work can be done in many different places.
So when we think about human resources, we think about recruitment, we think about attracting talent. But with the COVID-19 crisis, we noticed a big evolution. HR was drafting emergency communication procedures or even preventing the spread of germs in the office. Dr. Mbithi, can you tell us how do you feel about the evolution in the role of HR?
I would say that the tasks are not different, but what has happened is that HR's, shall I say, visibility and HR's importance has totally shifted. So before, HR was more like an administrator. We ran payroll quietly, we recruited quietly, but all of a sudden, if I was to look at my own role, HR became the conscious, HR became the stabilizer, HR started to help managers respond. At the beginning of the pandemic, I recall, all the questions came to HR. Oh, I'm about to have a baby. Can I go to work? Ask HR. And our job was to sort of say to our managers, look, here are a set of guidelines that you can work with. You take the decision, manager. You take the decision, supervisor. Staff member, think about yourself and let us think about how we can work differently. So yes, the role of HR did shift. We became, and we were forced to become stronger communicators. Because people, when there's a pandemic, what's a pandemic? It's a disease that no one knows what to do about. So we are operating in the unknown. And when there is a known, what do you want to do? Provide information, provide information. This is what we know, this is what we don't know. Within what we know, this is what we can do. And keep providing information to our staff, to our managers. And that's the role that HR has had to do. Take its policies, adjust them, become flexible, and then communicate and communicate. And not just communicate in a panicky manner, but in a very reassuring manner, because at the end of the day, nobody has the answers.
Josephine, What was your approach and strategies you used to support employees through the crisis?
We started off by having lots and lots of town hall conversations, and we encouraged a lot of town hall conversations. We linked very tightly with our communications team so that all our communications could go out and be and be discussed. And the question, and oftentimes people wondered, oh, am I going to lose my job? Am I going to lose my job because there is COVID and we're working from home? And quickly we started to realize that with COVID, particularly the type of organization that I work with, the work actually increased. I work for an organization that works against violence against women and girls, works against domestic violence, against harmful practices, female genital mutilation, against violence in the home. And you can imagine with COVID, these things erupted. They erupted. So the work became even more necessary, even more needed. And so my job becomes, how do we ensure that our staff can go out and do what they need to do and be protected and be safe? What happens if they get ill? So of course we had to come up with guidelines on how do you take care of yourself in the immediate term, and of course arrange for tougher times when you have to medically evacuate someone from a particular location to a location where they can get better care. So all these were guidelines that we really needed to put in place, because instead of the work decreasing, the work increased, and we needed to have more people getting out there and doing what they need to do.
Have you noticed a change due to COVID-19 when it comes to job seekers reconsidering applying for job outside the countries, or even employees reluctant to stay in some international job location, including Africa?
No, that's a very good question. And you'll find different people responded differently to that incident. We had a large number of people saying duty of care, we have got to stay and do what we need to do. The nature of work that we do requires presence, particularly in our leadership. So when things are falling apart, you need the leader in the organization to be there. So for the most part, people actually stayed in the country, wanted to stay in Africa. Of course, you have individuals who are perhaps in this category that we would call, people who are perhaps older, or people who have some underlying medical conditions that, really we would be putting them at risk to have them remain in the country. Those, we said, please move to a place where you are safe and continue to do your work. But for the large part, we are finding still a lot of interest in people applying for jobs in all over the world.
Following the killing of George Floyd and the marches in the US and all over the world, I'm pretty sure that it had an impact on the workplace. How can HR leaders keep diversity, equity, and inclusion top of mind during this economic and business disruption?
I was going to say, 2020 has been an incredible year. And for many HR professionals, very, very challenging. We start off with COVID. In the middle of COVID, we have the marches, and we have this real passion and desire for change erupting through the country. For us, it was, like everyone else, something that we needed to respond to very, very quickly. As a UN staff member, we are civil servants. And one of the guidelines that we have as civil servants is that we do not partake in political activity. But at the same time, our organization stands for human rights, and it has spoken for human rights since inception. So this was something that was really fundamental and really important. What we did is started conversations. And when we start conversations, it's very difficult not to make some type of progress. The conversations we had was with everybody. So rather than having conversations with people of African descent or Afrodescendientes, rather have conversations with everybody so that everybody can understand what are we talking about when we talk about the rights of everyone to belong into the organization and to be treated fairly. So we started with these conversations, which were very difficult. We talked about the experience. And all of us have had these experiences. You're in a store and someone says, do you work here? Because you can't possibly be shopping here. Or you apply for a job and someone says the only reason you got it is because you are a woman or because you are an African woman. Or you have a manager says, I can't fire that person, or I can't manage that person's performance because if I do, I will be called racist. So these were difficult conversations that we needed to have, and we have started to have them, and we hope to continue to have them. As we have them, we'll understand what metrics do we want to put in place so that we can measure ourselves and measure our progress. How are we represented when we look at our promotions, or we look at our hiring practices, or we look at our leadership? Do people get a sense of belonging? When you walk on the corridor, who are you seeing? When you listen to the leadership, who are you seeing? So all of these are important conversations that we're trying to have.
Dr. Mbithi, do you have any advice to give to HR practitioners or even students who currently looking for jobs?
I do. I have perhaps a parting message for HR practitioners and also organizational leaders. If you think about what has happened during COVID, we've had a whole group of students graduating, either from university or college or technical college or high school, and they're called the class of 2020. Now, this class of 2020 is like any other class, except that it has graduated in the year of COVID. Many of them have not even been able to attend a proper graduation ceremony. Now, the ceremony is not too terrible. What is harder for them is that they are graduating in a year when most organizations are becoming very cautious about hiring, cautious about expanding. So all of a sudden, these students who had really worked very hard, put in everything that they could to pass and get the degrees or the qualifications, are now entering a market that is perhaps shrinking. So my imploration to managers, to HR practitioners, to organizational leaders is find ways to hire these students or these ex-students, find ways to create opportunities, internships, fellowships, give them contracts, consultancies, do something to pick up this class of 22, which is a very special class, the class that graduated in the year of the pandemic.
Yeah.